Okay, go.
Hey, I'm Sam Aronow, and I'm in Chicago, where I thought it would be warm and sunny, but it is actually like 13 degrees and with an icy Arctic wind and overcast, because they just decided not to have summer here this year. I'm now in East Humboldt Park, which is actually the neighborhood where my family arrived when they came to America, as you might know if you've seen my most recent video. So a little bit of background. So right behind us is Western, and up there is North Street. And the reason those streets are named that is because back in like Civil War times, those were actually the western and the northern borders of the city. But then in the 1870s, when the fire happened and they really started building the city out, it expanded, and this was one of the first places to get built. So this was, as I said in the video, a streetcar suburb. You had streetcars on North, you had streetcars on, is that Division Street? I don't remember. And on Western. And you also had the L trains. So like a few cities did have subways and elevated train lines that served the same urban transit function, but they were faster than the streetcars because they didn't have to deal with traffic, and they had fewer stops, and they were also more expensive, so they tended to cater to a slightly more upmarket crowd. If you've watched anything about like Jago Hazard or Jay Foreman about London Transit and the trams versus the underground, this is kind of the same thing. And there was actually another line, a branch of the Blue Line called the Humboldt Park branch, which doesn't exist anymore, and it went just north of North Street. And I'm gonna put it on the map. I'll highlight it on my map of Chicago in the video. So the way, as I said in the video, the way streetcar companies made money, because these were private for-profit companies, isn't like they charge people for rides. The main thing that they did was real estate speculation. And they would open up new land for development, and then they would make the money from that, which is also why a lot of them, especially in smaller cities, didn't survive. I mean, a lot of them were also bought out by private car companies and such and shut down to eliminate competition. But another part of it was that these were not money-making enterprises because of the services that they provided, so they were kind of always destined to either be sort of socialized or go out of business. So unlike the suburbs of like post-World War II America, these were urban, dense, and you can see all around us, urban, dense areas. They were very popular for immigrants, especially Chicago, which was very, very aggressively segregated, probably more than anywhere else in America besides Milwaukee. Where the Jewish neighborhoods were has changed a bit. So back during the Civil War, and I'll put an old map because Chicago loved drawing maps of where all the different ethnicities lived. The original Jewish neighborhood was like a 2-block area in the loop at the confluence of the North and South Fork Chicago rivers. So that's where you would have recruited Company C from in the Civil War. But now it kind of moved out much more to the west side. There were Jewish neighborhoods in the north and the south side, but they were smaller. And the big three in western Chicago were here, East Humboldt Park, which was actually the smallest of the three, East Garfield Park, which is further south, and North Lawndale, which is even further south. All right, so we're on the corner of Hirsch and Campbell, and right here, 1410, this is where my great-great-grandparents lived, Joseph and Bessie Aronow. They were not the last to show up. So the first person in the family to show up was my great-great-uncle Sam. And I'm gonna go put up a picture of him on the video now. He came up and started a business taking care of horses that delivered milk around the neighborhood. The horse thing goes way back. So this is where they lived. And I believe in the photo where when my great-grandfather Jake and my great-grandmother and my aunt and my uncle were the last ones to come over right before the war began, they took that picture of everybody, of the Aronows and Solos and Zitches and other people I don't remember by name. It was probably taken in this living room. All right, we're at 1315 North Rockwell. This is where Jake Aronow came in. He and Sarah and their two kids, Oscar and Ethel, they were the last ones to arrive in America right before the war began, which means they were one of the last ones to make it over at all. And this is where they lived at first. I believe this is where my grandfather was born. I don't know what's going on downstairs. This may actually have had something to do with the family business, and they would have lived above it, but I'm not sure. And the nice thing is that this area, East Humboldt Park, is actually still an immigrant neighborhood. It's mostly Puerto Rican now. So that promise has kind of endured. You know, people have sometimes asked me, well, what did it look like back then? These are mostly the same buildings they would have had in 1914. The main thing that would have changed is the trees, because it would have all been new neighborhood, new development, and the trees would have all been just like newly, freshly planted out of the nursery. Which is why you can't film period pieces in neighborhoods like this. I was in one of those. I was in a terrible film set in the 1950s, directed by George Clooney, called Suburbicon. And they had to go to like the one neighborhood in all of greater Los Angeles that was like built in the 1950s, but didn't have any trees. It was in Fullerton, which is way, way out, like beyond the perimeter where you have to pay you more. So it was fun to film, but it was not a good movie. Although it wasn't as terrible, I thought, as most critics seem to think. But anyway, yeah, the trees would have been all been very small, and I feel like the vibe would have been quite different because of that, though I'm not sure exactly how it would have felt or looked like. I'm imagining it in my mind, but I guess you'd have to be there.
So was there a shul around here? Is there a remnant of a shul building?
Not that I'm aware of. Hello, it's Sam from The Following Day, and I can say that there definitely was a shul, and it was a very grand one. It's obviously a church now. It's a pretty classic grand synagogue design with the sanctuary not on the ground floor. Over here there's also a home for the elderly and a bunch of other institutions that clearly used to be Jewish institutions. Let's take a walk. Here we are at the Casa Central Community Center, but if you look at the building lettering, it actually says the Dr. Herzl Community Home. A lot of turn-of-the-century literature refers to Theodor Herzl as Dr. Herzl. Mark Twain does it a lot. Theodor Herzl wasn't any kind of doctor. I don't know if they had confused him with Nordau, or it was just like an honorary thing, like, I don't know, Dr. J. Anyway, this is where my grandfather grew up to a point. Jake and Sarah moved here pretty soon after coming to America, actually. They were in that place for a while, but then they were here. And so they had 2 children born in the old country, 3 born in America. So my grandpa Sam, and my aunt Bernice, and my uncle George, who was the Nazi hunting assassin. And
real casual.
At some point, thank you. At some point, my great-grandfather Jake, of whom I have only one known surviving picture, he died in an accident when he was 50 years old, or thereabouts. And this was in the Great Depression. It was sort of coming out of the Great Depression. It was 37. But that's when the family decided to up and move to LA. And at the same time, my Schenker family were ruined by the end of Prohibition, so they decided to sell everything and move to LA, and that's how my grandparents met. And then the LAPD tried to kill them all. So that's fun. But that's for future episodes. We'll get to it. And I hope you enjoyed this little tour of my family history. I am Sam Aronow, and I will see you for genuinely more, because I've already started filming it, more Jewish history on the road.